Save on your next oil change at O'Reilly Auto Parts. Choose Castrol Edge Full Synthetic Motor Oil to provide maximum performance and protection for your engine. Get a $15 gift card after rebate when you buy 5 quarts of Castrol Edge for $34.95. Plus 2 times O Rewards points. Offer valid in-store and online at O'ReillyAuto.com.
O'Reilly Auto Parts.
This is the actor's actor leader fan radio network.
And that's a fact.
And KFAN.com. 2 minutes, 2 seconds past 3 Central Standard Time. We welcome you back. It is a Thursday edition of the Bumper to Bumper Show on a calm before the Winami Thursday afternoon here in the Twin Cities of Minneapolis and St. Paul. I am the host of the program. My name is Dan Barreiro. Guardsy is the producer and sidekick of the program as well, and we're delighted that you are along for today's 3.5 hour tour. Russo Radio is scheduled for 5 o'clock today. Dr. Dan's inbox is scheduled for 4:30. You can still email Guardsy, jg@kfan.com with contributions. And next segment, about 10, 15 minutes from now, we will get a live report from La La Land. Orono's own Mike Trudell, now big-time Los Angeles Lakers reporter and studio host, will join to give us a scouting report on Wolves at Los Angeles and Luka's Lakers. That is coming up at 3:15. Mike Trudell. The actor's actor is gone. Gene Hackman has died at the age of, was it 95 years old?
Yes.
That's what I saw. 95 years old. And we will be owing the Hackman legacy throughout the show. At various times, almost from start to finish. I don't know how many times we've opened a show with Ode to a Dead Guy to an actor. But if not now, when? Hackman is worthy. He is on that level. And when I call him actor's actor, it's probably an overused term. But I think it does apply in Hackman's case. And the way I would describe what that means exactly, at least to me, is that within the profession, the assumption is, look, everybody wants to be a movie star, right? I mean, there's not anybody who goes to Hollywood that says, no, I'd rather not be a movie star, right? That's part of the allure. But I think within the profession, there's a distinction between individuals who seem to largely be playing themselves. They become so big that they're playing themselves. And individuals who are playing the character, who to a certain extent seem to get lost in the character so effectively, so seamlessly that you go, that's an actor's actor, right? So when you watch over the years, certainly early especially, Gene Hackman, I don't think you thought you were watching Gene Hackman. I think Hackman played not himself so much as the character. So he becomes Max Millen in Scarecrow. He becomes Lex Luthor in Superman. He becomes FBI Special Agent Rupert Anderson in Mississippi Burning. He becomes Sheriff Little Bill Daggett in Unforgiven. Avery Tolar in The Firm. Buck Barreiro in Bonnie and Clyde. And, of course, Norman Dale in Hoosiers. Ain't no pretty boy in Gene Hackman. In fact, he had a famous quote once upon a time saying it was a rude awakening when he came out of the cinema in Danville, Illinois, double feature, Palace Theater, having just been inspired by an Errol Flynn swashbuckler, only to come out into the lobby and be reminded by one of the movie posters and the mirror, I don't look anything like Errol Flynn. I'm not that dashing. If I'm going to be transported or if I'm going to transport people, It's going to have to be because I lose myself in the character, not because people go, oh, that guy is a good-looking guy. That guy's got something extra, great to look at, eye candy, etc. And because of all that, I think that's why within the acting profession, there are very few who are as respected, have been as respected the last half a century, longer, than Gene Hackman. I dare say there may be no character we have quoted from in sound bites over the years more often than Norman Dale and Hoosiers. Guardsy's usually leading the way on that. Always has been one of his favorite sports movies. It was obviously one of my favorite sports movies. And as we will be reminded today, there are a lot of people, including Gene Hackman, who, as he's making the film, is going, what have I done? Where's this going? I'm miserable. I don't think this is going to go anywhere. And, of course, the rest is history. If we're ranking, well, see, I think it almost is, it cheapens the motion picture Hoosiers to call it a sports film. On many levels, that's what it is. But I would say it's much greater than that at its best. It's a redemption motion picture, isn't it? It's a film about a fallen man trying to discover a last act, right? To get himself back up to a place where he can respect himself again and other people might respect him. Yeah, so sports is the vehicle. And, of course, it's based on a true story with a lot of embellishment, not the least of which is this part of it, the character that Hackman plays in the film. Norman Dale is the fictitious part of the story. But I think that's part of the reason it resonates with so many people, whether you care about basketball, whether you care about sports at all. It seemed a lot more at work in retelling that story. And as I said, sometimes some of the greatest art, the folks doing it at the time it's being done have no idea what they've got. He didn't. He's admitted it. Go back to my favorite motion picture of all time, Casablanca. Story's similar. The people who are putting together Casablanca, the actors who were in it, the producers, even the director, they weren't sure what the hell they had. And in fact, I think as the story goes, they were still writing and rewriting parts of the script like the last day on the set. Turns out to be one of the most memorable films, most watched motion pictures of all time. And Hoosiers might not be on that level, but it is certainly an example of, I think, how effectively, even if he didn't know as it's taking place because of the perfectionist that he is, the impact Gene Hackman can have immersing himself in a character. Did he remind you of other Gene Hackman roles there? No, I don't think so. He reminded you of the character he was playing. So, look, he's been retired for the better part of 20 years. So it's not like, lately he's been in very many motion pictures. But we do this when people pass away, understandably. We are reminded at the impact, culturally speaking. Gene Hackman didn't cure any disease. But we are reminded of the impact great actors, especially one of his, like I said, ones of his ilk, have on the rest of the population. Because today and tonight and the next couple days, around the water coolers, around your favorite watering hole, if anybody still goes to watering holes, maybe even right around the kitchen table, people are going to be talking about their favorite Gene Hackman scenes. We're going to play some of them today between now and 6:30 about some of his most memorable roles and sort of the impact, the lasting impact that these films have. Guardsy's also found his acceptance speech when this was, I think, a Lifetime Achievement Award going back to about 25 years ago, 2002 maybe, a little less than that. And he takes us back to his memories in that anonymous movie theater, watching double feature films as he's a kid and how it transported him. So there will be plenty of celebrating of the Gene Hackman legacy over the course of the better part, more actually, than a half a century. If you've got your own thoughts, let me know. Bradshaw and Bryant KFAN text line 64686. We can, I think, to a certain extent, make this a little bit our story. Because he has said many times that he believes growing up in the Midwest, that's part of who he became. He admits he wanted to escape it because I don't think he liked cold weather. But he admits that that's in his roots. So to that extent, it's not necessarily a Minnesota story, but it might well be a Midwestern story and what kind of made Gene Hackman what he was. The guy, along with Dustin Hoffman, that was told, they were told, while working at the Pasadena, California Playhouse, least likely to succeed in Hollywood. The two of them, least likely to succeed.
It's a rough award to give out, by the way.
Dustin Hoffman and Gene Hackman. Worked out pretty well for both of them, and not bad in Gene Hackman's case for a guy who used to work at Hojo's. That's how he used to make ends meet. Gene Hackman working at Howard Johnson's. You can't make it up. Let's come back, and we'll continue to celebrate his career throughout. Mix in sound bites. I think we're going to have a lot of fun with this. But when we come back, Wolves are in action tonight. They have been in Los Angeles, it feels like, for the better part of a month. They will take on the Lakers. Nobody knows the Lakers better than Mike Trudell. He knows the Wolves pretty well, too. Orono's own Mike Trudell is next here in the Fan.
O'Reilly.
Save on your next oil change at O'Reilly Auto Parts. Choose Castrol Edge Full Synthetic Motor Oil to provide maximum performance and protection for your engine. Get a $15 gift card after rebate when you buy 5 quarts of Castrol Edge for $34.95. Plus 2 times O Rewards points. Offer valid in-store and online at O'ReillyAuto.com.
O'Reilly Auto Parts.
Wolves in action tonight against the Los Angeles Lakers, who might have made an acquisition that got some attention in recent weeks to help us get a better handle on how life has changed in Los Angeles, California, for even a team that is used to having, obviously, outsized attention. We thought it would be a good idea to chat with a Minnesotan, an always grounded Minnesotan, who never forgets his roots, but has become Hollywood. He, of course, reports on the Los Angeles Lakers and has joined us and Guardsy many, many times over the years. Mike Trudell, kind enough to join us via the Connecticut Water Systems hotline. How are you, sir?
Dan, always a pleasure. I already saw a tweet from Guardsy preempting a strike that I might make on Edina High School on Twitter right now. I mean, all I was going to do was say my practices aren't designed for your enjoyment. I wasn't going to say that that's directly correlated to what JG's coach at Edina said when they would play teams that had less money and the rackets weren't as nice.
Yes.
But that's fine. I guess I'll just get it out of the way.
Yeah, I think we're probably better off getting it out of the way and don't go passive-aggressive on the bit, because I think maybe you've been in California. How long? You've been in California for 20 years now, haven't you?
Oh, man, almost. Since 2008.
Oh, okay. So yeah, close, getting there. Yeah. I mean, so it is it possible that your Midwestern roots have been drummed out of you by now?
Well, Dan, I remember when I got the job at first, one of my favorite employees with the Wolves, Susan Eitel, she used to say Hollywood when I would come back. And when I got out here, I realized Hollywood is only but one small section of a city with 17 million people if you include Orange County area. So lots going on out here. I get that the Hollywood vibe is part of what you would get most from Minnesota, but I live in closer to like an Orono part and not in the Edina part.
I understand. That probably does help to keep you somewhat grounded, for sure.
Although I heard there's more and more money in Orono these days, so maybe I have to.
Yeah, you haven't been to Orono in a minute, buddy. You need to get back to Orono. It's not
changes.
your Orono.
Yeah, it ain't your daddy's Orono,
Okay.
that's for sure. All right, let me ask you, this is my toss-up question to you. The Lakers, historically, have been a franchise sort of used to getting their way, right? Where, we want Kareem. Okay, we're going to get Lou Alcindor / Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. We're going to get Kobe. We're going to get Shaq. We're going to get, eventually we're going to get whoever we want. But I'm wondering, even by those built-in standards, if there weren't some Lakers folks kind of pinching themselves and saying, we did what? How would you speak to whatever shock, even for a team used to getting its way, the knowledge that they got their way again, maybe in a bigger way when you factor in age and many other things than they ever have before with Luka?
Dan, I think it's an insightful way to ask the question because typically when there's a star that could be moving, you have heard about it, and said star may list a couple of different markets that they would be comfortable going. And the Lakers are always going to be on that list. And at that point, as somebody that's in Los Angeles, you're sort of lining up and just waiting for that player to choose the destiny that so many before have. Or for the team to trade for such player, most recently would be Anthony Davis, of course. So you can think back to Pau Gasol or to Shaq, where, even if the trades that when they actually happened were a surprise on the day, it wasn't a surprise that those players would sort of edge their way over to the Lakers. In this case, I'm just sitting on the bus leaving Madison Square Garden, driving through Manhattan when, I see the tweet from Shams. And, then there are some other people on the bus that could or could not confirm that. So I at least didn't have to deal with the hey, has this guy been hacked? Which was, of course, going out in a rampant way. So that part of it was completely fair. Everybody was shocked. Max Christie was on the front of the bus in this context. AD actually wasn't with the team because he was injured on that trip, so he went back to LA to rehab it. But yes, a total shock. And then I think if you zoom out more, you could see how it would make sense where at some point, like Luka Doncic would be one of those players that you would try to bring into the fold as being the next guy of the future. But nobody certainly foresaw how it was going to go down and what happened, Dan. It was crazy.
So since he has been there, what has surprised even you about the reaction? I mean, you kind of knew, I think, what the reaction was going to be. But is there anything about this whole, Luka experience to this point that you didn't see coming?
I think that what's been most striking to me is that we all know what kind of player Luka Doncic is. You guys certainly do.
Yeah.
We saw Rudy Gobert certainly knows from what happened in just the ridiculously voracious way that he looked at him after he hit that dagger. Like, that is Luka. That's what he does on the court. He just led his team to the finals. He's been All-NBA first team 5 times before the age of 25, which almost nobody does. So, all of that hasn't been questioned. And so to hear all of the chatter and all of the noise about some of the off-court things relating to his fitness, or if he likes to have a beer once in a while, like Guardsy and I might next time he comes to LA, if the Lakers aren't on the Grammy trip when he's covering UCLA, or when he's covering the Gophers, I should say. All those things are what we're talking about this much. This is Luka Doncic, and then as he's been on the court, he looks like Luka Doncic. Even though his shot isn't going in yet because he doesn't have his legs fully under him, he just grabbed 15 rebounds last game. He's averaging around 10 assists. He's got 3 steals and 2 blocks. He's Luka Doncic. And so that's been the part to me that's been hard to square, kind of trying to understand that part from the Mavs perspective, because what he does on the court is just so much more loud than anything else, at least for me.
Yeah, the one of the subplots that continues to emerge seems to be almost every other day, even at this late date since the trade, which has now been a while, another damaging report on why the Mavericks did what they did. And a lot of people are asking the obvious out loud, that what's the end game? How does this serve the interests of the Mavericks moving forward to constantly being viewed as whether it's within the organization, and maybe that's even unfair. Maybe it's other people around the organization that continue to sort of, let out these whispers of, well, we didn't like this, or we got the hookah Luka, we got this situation, we got that situation. Is it what would possibly motivate those around this team to continue to go down that road, other than, I guess, they're so defensive about moving on a 25-year-old superstar that they feel like maybe they're under siege and they have no choice. It's not unprecedented. It's happened before, but I don't know if it's continued to happen weeks afterwards. There's been almost, on the national media side, almost a daily onslaught of, here's another rumor, here's why the Mavericks said they had to part ways.
Yeah, I think you hit on it at the end there, Dan, where just that, what do you do when you take the action to move on from somebody and they go somewhere else? And you can even think about this in a dating context. After you date somebody, what do you and that person has their glow up and hits the gym and whatever it is, and then you're telling that person, oh yeah, well she actually was like this, and actually she was like that,
right,
and meanwhile everybody else is like, I don't know, everything looks pretty good to me. So that part I think is that may continue if maybe it's only a couple of people from the Dallas organization that are speaking like that, but around the league, Dan, and this will be, I'll talk to Jim Pete right tonight in the arena. I'll talk to somebody else who works in the Wolves front office. I'll talk to some people that come in. Like, there's nobody else questioning and really wondering, I think, what Luka Doncic is as a player. So it's the 99% of stuff that I hear is all kind of the positive parts of, wow, this is a franchise superstar moving forward now that hopefully from a Lakers standpoint is in Los Angeles for a very long time. And that's the easy part to focus on. So whatever else is coming out of Dallas, I think almost could it serve as additional fuel for Luka Doncic? Maybe, but when you're a guy like Doncic, or I'd say Anthony Edwards is in this camp, LeBron James, you are already going to find motivation that you need, even if it's not there. Like, that's what the real great ones do. So I don't think Luka needed more fuel necessarily, but if he did, it certainly seems to be there.
Do you think he's past the reeling stage? I mean, it did seem early, like he was a bit in a daze, right? Because it's fairly obvious he didn't expect this to happen this way. It's not supposed to happen to 25-year-old stars and superstars, and it is, in a sense, one could say, a repudiation, even if you may not necessarily, as the person involved, agree with it. He seemed really stunned. You think he is already starting to settle in, or do you think he's still in the stunned stage?
I think he's still kind of in the stun stage. I mean, he basically said as much after the game against Dallas, where he's like, it's been such a whirlwind. He couldn't even describe how he felt because of all of the conflicting emotions. On the one hand, there's Kyrie Irving, with whom he grew really tight. There's Derek Lively, and he's now being guarded by these guys. Or in the case of Kyrie, Lively is obviously hurt. So he's dealing with those emotions. Then he looks over and he sees Mark Cuban courtside. Cuban, who's no longer the principal owner and the decision maker, right? Then Nico Harrison's there before the game, and then he's getting an incredible amount of love from the Laker fans and his Laker teammates, and the team is really good. So just so much stuff going on. I think he's trying his best to focus on what he can, which is playing basketball amidst everything that's going on. And fortunately, he has quite a big tool chest to go to in that context. So that's, like I said earlier, Dan, even if the shots aren't going in from three so far, I think he's 10 for 40.
Yeah,
that's going to get back up to what he usually has. But when it's not going in, he can do 10 other things in a half-court set in order to be good. So he's falling back upon that stuff right now. But emotionally, I don't know how it won't take a long time to really fully come to terms with everything that changed in his life.
Mike Trudell, beat reporter for Lakers, sideline reporter, host, analyst, bon vivant, the whole bit, Northwestern University alum. I'm looking at his Twitter description. Definitely worth a follow, especially on a night like this. So, in your mind, have you seen enough of this new configuration to get a sense of how far this team can go this year? Because there's an easy trap to fall into, I think, nationally that, well, why can't the sky be the limit? Look at these two guys. They know how to play together. They're both stars. They can play off each other fine. Why not? The Western Conference might be a little bit more open than we think. So, is the sky the limit this year? Because I always looked at this move as more likely for the Lakers a move for the future more than it was necessarily the assumption that we have a chance to actually make a run right now. What do you see? What do you think?
Well, I think the beauty of the trade from the Lakers standpoint is that you can do both. Like, when you're acquiring Luka Doncic, a top 5 player, even if it takes him a little time to get to know his teammates, to get into rhythm, he's still the exact guy that you want on the court in a playoff series. Because there isn't really a good matchup for Luka Doncic. There isn't one for Jokic. There isn't one for LeBron. And there isn't one for a couple of other guys around the league. I think Anthony Edwards is kind of rapidly climbing that list to where he's going to be able to give you something in the crunch, in crunch time on offense and on defense. And so that immediately kind of brings Luka into the fold, and it brings the Lakers to a higher level. But I think if you hadn't been watching the Lakers every night, and really, who can? Nobody can really watch other teams every night. Dan, they've been steadily excellent on defense, despite Anthony Davis not being within the fold now for over 2 weeks. And how have they done it? Well, J.J. Redick has been brilliant. He really has. He's been excellent, and he's got them playing for each other with this team concept. They've got a bunch of big bodies now. Like Rui Hachimura is 6'8". Dorian Finney-Smith, who they got from Brooklyn, is 6'8". Jared Vanderbilt comes off the bench. Wolves fans know him and how rangy he is. These are kind of tough guy vet pros who take the little things seriously. And then you add that to LeBron and Luka plus Austin Reeves, who is probably the third best offensive player on a team, if that makes sense. Another team doesn't have a third guy who can create to the level that he can, I don't think, efficiently. Maybe Derek White's the closest thing, but between the two of them, I'd probably go in Reeves' way. White gets the defensive edge, of course. So, all of that together, Dan, has essentially formed a team that is number one in defensive efficiency for the last 15 games and climbing higher and higher on offense as Luka gets settled. So, I think they're absolutely a contender. And maybe the biggest question is not Luka, it's not the vets, it's can LeBron keep this incredible year 22, 40-year-old pace of playing hard on both ends? Can he sustain that through 4 series? And right now, his meter certainly seems to be high. I think he's been energized a lot by having Luka Doncic in town.
That's exactly where I wanted to go next. I think this was a Redick quote from a week ago. He's on LeBron. He's a billionaire, and he's playing on the second night of a back-to-back at 40. After 22 years, with every frickin' record and every accolade, and the kids will say that I'm, quote, glazing him, but he's one of the greatest competitors. It sounds preposterous, but I think you can make the argument that at this point, LeBron James might be a little bit underrated. I mean, the stuff that he's doing, and you see it every day. I'm not. I'm watching it from afar, or I'm watching highlights, and I'm hearing it. It's odd, but I do think because this is not supposed to happen with 40-year-olds, obviously, playing basketball. So give us a sense of what you see with LeBron and how he is pulling this off.
Just real quick, an interjection here. Garzi, has Dan used glazing in context before?
I don't think I've ever heard that. No, I think that's a first.
I'm trying to get younger. Okay. You know what I'm saying?
I don't think he's used it in any context, in or out. Right. So we'll take it.
It sounded smooth the way that it rolled off his tongue. So I was like, is he that hip?
Not really.
Not that you weren't. Not that I didn't think you were, Dan. No. But that sounded pretty smooth.
Not at all. I'm not that hip for sure. I'm faking it. I'm doing the best I can.
Okay, gotcha. To answer your actual question. So I've been now monitoring LeBron, right, in up close and personal. This is, I think, year 7 that I've covered him. And before that, I had 8 years of Kobe. And before that, I was really lucky to get 1 year of KG, right, before he moved to Boston. And so, just kind of peering into the soul and just listening to these guys and trying to figure out what makes them tick. But, KG at that stage, and then Kobe, who was post-Achilles, of course, when he got up to that age, they just were not at the level that LeBron is, which right now, guys, is at worst all-NBA second team. I've already done everything. I've added up the totals. And by the way, Anthony Edwards, I would also have on second team. You could make an argument second, third, depending on where the Wolves end up. But so that's where he is. And I think before the season, the question was, there are 82 games. How much can LeBron put towards night-to-night defense? And you could even take the game in Minnesota in early December where LeBron wasn't playing great at that stage of the season on defense. Now, he was still getting his numbers. It was still somehow getting 20, 25, 7, and 8. But he had a conversation with Redick a couple of days after that. And since then, he's just completely rebought in to what he's doing on both ends of the court, and he's finding ways to sustain this without sitting games, really. He's only missed a couple. So I'm at the point where I'm just done kind of betting against it and expecting that Father Time is going to come this season, because it's been so consistent these last couple of weeks that LeBron James is somehow carrying the defense. And now, by having Luka Doncic here, he can rest some on offense. That was always the idea, Dan, even 4 or 5 years ago. Hey, bring somebody else in here, let LeBron rest a little more on offense. But what happens is he's so much better in offense than everyone else that the ball finds him and his teammates are like, please make this play for us. Well, now you've got Luka to do that, and he can kind of manage a game and a season a little bit better, I think. So I don't have anything else to say about it right now because the sample size is large enough that I think that you have to kind of buy into it.
You know, we were talking about Edwards yesterday, and you follow this club closely. You grew up with this team, and I know you continue to pay attention to what they're trying to put together the year after making the run to the conference finals. And it's unfair to compare anyone to LeBron any more than it's fair to compare any other great player to Michael, obviously. But what strikes me about LeBron, I don't know who was talking about this the last day or two, that among the hidden strengths with him, the sneaky strengths that people probably don't talk about enough, is his ability to play off the ball, his ability to cut, his ability to find angles, to create space. And it's really, to me, got to be, even though they play different positions and they're built differently in many ways, to me, that's Anthony Edwards' next challenge, is he has to do a better job off the ball of not just standing and waiting for the ball to come back to him, but to try, and I don't know, maybe the offenses are so different that there's not the same opportunity in that regard. But to me, that's Anthony, that's the next step, is to get easier stuff, to take some of that heat off of him having to run everything down the stretch of games, is to make stuff happen where he's cutting better, he's finding openings, and he's getting the ball in places where he can do something with it.
So, Dan, if I can, I want to try to take a step back and a zoom out on Anthony Edwards and just looking at and sort of how all of this comes into context with these other great players, some of whom that we've been mentioning. And Ant is 23.
Right.
Like there has been no NBA player, I shouldn't say no, but very, very few NBA players actually maximize their game to the point that they can win a title before the age of 27. That's the year you can look back at all of the different greats. It includes Magic, it includes Shaq, it includes Kobe. Kobe, of course, won some as the number 2 behind Shaq. And by the way, if you put Anthony Edwards with Nikola Jokic right now, he probably would win a title. Okay, at age 23. But to be the guy where his game is complete, and he's adding some of the subtleties that you just got to. He's really learning how to manipulate a defense. You know, he really knows when to marshal his defensive effort on the ball versus kind of hang out on the weak side. All of those things, to me, he gets 4 more years to really kind of get to that point where he's at his sharpest level.
Sure.
And yet, because he has been so good so fast, we expect him to be 7th in MVP voting, which he was last year, if I'm not mistaken. All-NBA second team approaching first. And so it's very difficult to separate what we see in front of us. Oh, why aren't you doing this? I've already seen how great you are. And then also have that perspective that, this dude needs a couple more years to find that, and the only way that it can happen is through experience. And I also would love to have him have a bit more of an open floor to attack.
I agree.
And I think that's been the way that the Wolves have built. I think that's been limiting some to him. But I hope that wasn't too far astray. But that's how I feel about him.
That's very fair, and that's why I say adding it. Not that it's concerning that he hasn't yet, but I think it would make the game. The game some nights is really, as good as he is, you can tell it's hard on him because he doesn't get very many easy baskets. And, obviously it would help to have a player who can pass like Luka, because that's what we're already seeing with LeBron, right? Just getting to the right space, Luka's going to find him. And we're already seeing a lot of that. From afar, as you know, the Wolves are trying to piece this thing back together. They're trying to get healthier. I think Dante is supposed to go tonight. The belief is he'll probably play tonight. I think Randall, they're still holding off on him. So is there time for this team to put something together to make a run this year? Is it too late? Is it too different, given obviously the big trade that they still haven't fully recovered from that took place a couple days before training camp? What do you see from afar on the Wolves?
I still I like the Wolves, I think, a little bit more than the collective right now, but I do think that they're a piece or two away, from winning 4 playoff series, right? Or getting back to the Western Conference Finals, just because of the way that, if you put Edwards and Randall and Gobert, just those 3, the fit isn't ideal, right? It's not perfect. And that's not a criticism, by the way. I understood why they would have done the trade, thinking in the long term and who they can ultimately pair with Anthony Edwards and all that. But can they and not only that, that's one part of that's one piece. Then you have some of the guys like Conley, who's, at the later stages.
Yep.
And then you've got the really young kids who we saw go off in the fourth quarter against OKC. You've got Dillingham, you've got Shannon, and so you've got, I actually, by the way, like Josh Minot a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
But you've got some of the pop. But you need those guys to get a little more experience, and then you need to have that fit a little bit better on the top of the roster. And of course, you throw in McDaniels and Naz Reid, who are kind of right there with Ants in terms of guys who are they're not young anymore, but they're still not at their prime, they're still not at their peak. So that's a lot of masters to serve. For me, and a lot of that begs a lot. It asks a lot for a team to find that level of cohesion with so many disparate parts on a team. But that's not to say that they couldn't beat Houston in a playoff series. It's not to say that they couldn't beat the Grizzlies, who I think are good but not great. Now, I'm not going to pick them to beat the Thunder, and I think I would at this point. I think I would pick the Lakers in that kind of a matchup. But I wouldn't be thrilled to play the Wolves and see all the size and the talent and the athleticism, and then Anthony Edwards late. So I'm trying to lower at my own expectation a bit of it, but they're not a team that you can just summarily dismiss either once the playoffs start.
Ticket demand, is it palpably different in Los Angeles with the Luka phenomenon? It's always obviously been a popular ticket, and I assume not a real cheap ticket. But are we seeing everything even enhanced even more? What's your feel on that?
No, it does enhance, but I guess I would liken the Lakers tickets, in generally speaking, to the Vikings, where I've never been home and wanting to go to a game and just found no interest in there's always a certain level. There's always a baseline. We're pretty much sold out every night. So has that raised a little bit with the expectation of Luka and certainly guys last game when they played against Dallas, that added a little bit of extra juice. The amount of text messages that I get asking for tickets has probably gone up a little bit.
Right.
Although at this point, I've been here so long that I'm perfectly happy just saying no and not even doing the explanation of, hey, sorry, maybe I'll try to get them next week. But yes, I'm answering this in a too long of a manner, but it's gone up a little bit, but there's always a pretty good baseline for Laker games.
Have fun tonight. It's always good to catch up. I think Guardsy's got a final postscript for you.
I've got one question. We're all wondering, did Rob Pelinka ever give you your jacket back after he borrowed it for the Luka press conference? Or did he just keep that?
It's an insightful thing for you to ask because, that is a jacket that would probably fit me. What I've always admired how Rob Pelinka's clothes are tailored to the extent they can show off a guy who, I'll just say this, every time we're on the road and Pelinka comes on a road trip and I go to the gym, he's in the gym.
He's in it.
So this is a guy that works. Okay. He played with the Fab Five at Michigan. He is in shape and I respect it. I just can't afford that jacket. Guardsy, maybe if I were from Edina, I could have afforded that jacket.
Yeah, another Edina
would have been a
hand-me-down
somewhere. Yeah, it would have been a hand-me-down somewhere.
By the way, was the press conference the first time you saw that jacket, or in LA? It's that Pelinka jacket. Yeah, we've seen that a bunch of times before.
No, I hadn't seen it before. Again, I think that I don't see Rob wear the same thing twice too often. I think he's on top of the fashion game.
Yeah. Come a long way from the University of Michigan, no question about that. Great to catch up. Say hi to Kilborn. I assume Kilborn's going tonight. Guardsy, have you heard from Craigers? I have not. I'll be shocked if when the Wolves are playing locally, I would think
he finds a way.
Craigers would find a way to be there. Yeah, one way or the other. So if you see him, tell him hello and enjoy the night.
All right, guys. Pleasure talking to you. Say hello to everybody in Minnesota for me, or I guess I just did.
You just did. Thanks, Mike.
All right, see you.
That is Mike Trudell, Orono's own, now longtime Lakers beat reporter on the Laker TV network. And he also does plenty of not just sideline reporting, but hosting in the studio, etc. He's become a big fixture out there. And now, a whole nother era has begun that, as he said, even in La La Land, where they always expect to get the best players, they did not necessarily see this one coming. Don't forget, we've got Russo Radio scheduled for 5 o'clock this afternoon or evening. Dr. Dan's inbox before that in about 40 minutes or so. Email guardsyjg at KFAN.com. We started the show with what's going to be kind of an ongoing ode throughout the day throughout the program to Gene Hackman, the story breaking that he was found dead in his home along with his wife. And I believe one of their dogs, I think two other dogs, one in the home, one on the property, were found okay, but one of their dogs was also found dead. And originally, one of the theories being advanced by, I believe, a member of the Hackman family was the possibility of carbon monoxide poisoning. Authorities since have, I believe, ruled that out. They've taken tests and found no indication of that being an issue. And now I think there's more concern about perhaps it being a bit more suspicious. I think the bodies were found in two different locations, and it appears, according to the Associated Press report I read, that Hackman had fallen as well. But I think his wife was elsewhere in the home. And if there's new information on that, let me know. It appears also, I think, that this had happened the belief is happened several days ago. Some workers had gone in and they found the bodies, correct? And it's on so many levels, it just sounds like an absolutely awful story. And one hopes that eventually it will be followed properly and we'll get a little bit more detail on exactly what took place here. You know, we had talked about Hackman sometime within the last 6 months because he was victimized. I don't know if that's the right term. That's the way I viewed it. By a paparazzi found him. I want to say it was at a gas station. I don't remember where it was, but wherever he was, he looked. It's sort of like the Jack Nicholson story. Looked very disheveled. Mm-hmm. Didn't quite look like himself. And I asked them the same thing I always ask when those reports surface. It's like, are we really that sick and that curious that we want to, I guess, stare? Look, amazing. Gene Hackman's 95, and he looks like he might be 95.
He's aged.
We're surprised. I don't understand it. It's much worse for women, I might add, as we've talked about over the years. Awful, in fact. But he'd been retired for the better part of, I think, 20 years. He wasn't interviewed a lot because he did not enjoy the process. There's a lot of actors where that's the case, but he didn't do a bunch of interviews. He did a few, and many of them are now surfacing. And one of them that we're going to play a good, about 2-minute clip is with Larry King, I believe. It's Gene Hackman, and I found this one interesting, Guardsy, in no small measure, just because of, I thought, what he had to say about, he was very introspective at this point about doing interviews, for example, and what his discomfort in that regard. So let's listen to this. This has to go back at least 20 years, maybe longer, with Larry King. I do not remember this interview when it took place. I may have seen it at the time, but we'll play a brief passage between the two of them.
You don't do a lot of interviews, though, do you?
I do them for film when we're out doing the junkets. But
you don't do sit-down, elaborate, extensive.
No,
You don't like it?
I don't like to talk about myself that much.
Why?
I don't know. It's the same as watching myself on film. It makes me uncomfortable. I love doing the acting. I love that part of it. When I'm doing it, I'm just totally enraptured. But when I see myself on the screen, it's that I see my grandfather there or something. You know, I see,
really?
I think of myself as being 21. You do too, I know.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
You also got late into acting, right? You weren't an 18-year-old knocking on doors to get into theater.
No. I went to the Marines when I was 16, and I spent 4.5 years in the Marines, and then came right to New York to be an actor. And then 7 years later, I got my first job.
Do you know why you wanted to act?
Well, I know. Yes, my mother and I were at a film once, and we came out through the lobby, and she said, "I want to see you do that someday," and that was all it was needed, because I already wanted to do it, but you have to have somebody tell you, or you need to be pushed a bit, and that's the only thing she's ever said to me about acting.
Do you sometimes see a finished product and say, "I don't like me"?
I don't, because I try not to watch it.
You don't watch the film.
I try not to.
You don't watch
sometimes no, never. Sometimes I have to watch because I'm going to go off and do publicity, and I need to know kind of what happened to the other people and all that. But it just makes me very nervous. Very nervous.
To sit in a movie theater and see yourself.
I'm always afraid somebody's going to sit in front of me and say, "Are you kidding? Let's get out of here."
How many actors are in that same boat, right? They say, I can't watch myself. I can't because all I see, no matter how masterful the performance is viewed, all I'm going to remember is I should have gone with this inflection instead of that, this look instead of that, right? There's the level of self-loathing among some of the best is legendary, right? He's not unique in that regard, but it seems like many actors are in that classification, don't you think?
Yes. There's an insecurity that probably keeps them sharp and keeps them going and make sure that they take every detail that they possibly can. Yeah, I mean, one of the other interviews, I don't even know if we have it, but he talked about how you never really think of yourself as, well, you know, I'm an actor. Yeah, I've done it. You're always thinking about that you're still striving for it. You never accept that you have, quote unquote, arrived. I mentioned earlier he had worked for a while at a Howard Johnson's restaurant when he allegedly encountered an instructor from the Pasadena Playhouse who said that his job proved that Hackman, quote, wouldn't amount to anything. A Marine officer saw Hackman as a doorman and said, "Hackman, you're a sorry SOB," end quote. And Hackman later said, that's the kind of rejection that was fuel for me. It doesn't sound very different than you hear about from athletes, quite frankly, right? A lot of great athletes. Go ahead. Doubt me. He said, it was more psychological warfare because I wasn't going to let those bleepers get me down. I insisted with myself that I would continue to do whatever it took to get a job. It was like me against them, and in some way, unfortunately, I still feel that way. But I think if you're really interested in acting, there's a part of you that relishes the struggle. It's a narcotic in the way that you are trained to do this work, and nobody will let you do it, so you're a little bit nuts. You lie to people, you cheat, you do whatever it takes to get an audition, get a job. I know Guardsy's, I assume we have, because we've played it before, the Norman Dale speech as they're preparing to get one step closer to the state championship. I'm sure we'll play that before we're done. We have what had to be a heavy editing job. I hope you succeeded. Had a couple of people listen to it.
The meltdown in a terrific moment in a motion picture called Mississippi Burning. And there's a couple more that we'll include, including, as you mentioned, his acceptance speech when he won a Lifetime Achievement Award, taking us back to his childhood and what moved him at an early age inside the movie theater. And then, last but not least, and maybe we even play this when we come back, there's a clip of the director, the first-time director when it comes to movies, of Hoosiers, telling the story years later that might surprise you regarding the making of his experience, job experience, directing that motion picture, and where Hackman fits into all of that. And it also speaks to, as we said earlier, Hackman's apparent dislike of the film as they're making it, or not a belief that the thing was coming together in a way that was going to be very well accepted. And obviously the rest is history. It's one of the most accepted, certainly sports movies of all time. So let's get a pause in here. Top of the hour break. We'll continue. If you got Hackman anecdotes for us or observations, keep them coming, because we'll include those in the conversation as well.